naba kabantu abayenza lento ba ibe impumelelo yakhiwa bayinika ubomi. And maqabane ndifuna ukuthi thanks to you. Yes, we are no longer popular in the institution. Juba say you led the march. Say to you at the forefront when the campus was burning. If you Google, ngexesha NMU was under siege, you type there, you will see these two faces in front of that march. So they are carrying a legacy in the context of Nelson Mandela University. Andifuna uthetha ke ngawe Nkosi yami kuthethwe njemulapha nangoku usaleqwa ngamanye amahlahla. Kodwa sifuna ukuthi masingapheli mandla. Ngoku sizowublessa la idea yaqala eKenred. Very interesting ukuthi we started this program in the height of Fees Must Fall, when there was nothing happening on campus. Lamakabane ati brasobs, this is a great opportunity. What is the role of Kenred as they send that advances non-racialism and democracy? The campus is burning. What are we doing? And then they said, we have a space, we have tables, we have chairs. We don't have food, we don't want food, we don't want water. All we need is just a space to convene as student leaders. After, so because double pelimos. Then we said, come to the space of Kenred. And at the time, fortunately, you know, izinto work in funa ubizela gama ngathi ndizawuba ndiyongena eBhayibhelini. Kodwa izinto zenzeka ngokwehlobo lazo. I was an acting director at Kenred at the time of Fees Must Fall. Dathi maqabane masiyenze masichaye iqhuma. uPetro will tell you ndabizelwa kwi-DC of the university. Oba, we have given you this responsibility to assist the university in the absence of Mr. Allen Zinn, who was my director. Then the former DVC, he was like, but now we don't know what you are doing. I was like, well, Prof, I mean, you can take me out. I don't want to act anyway. But the activism in me, as long as I'm part of Kenred, even tomorrow, the students will still come and debate. Yeah. So here we are. Even in 2025, we are still not the favorites because of the work that we do. Funukuti kuni maqabane nani maqhawekazi siyabulela kakhulu makwande ndizawubuyisela kuwe ke intambo kaTlego kukho ingoma every time xa kwakuzawuqala uFees Must Fall okanye xa usiva intshukumo. There was a song esithi nangoku when we reflect ethi noba kubi noba sesidutyulu yazi. I was saying to ubaba simamele kwakukho ubaba uSam sipha eKenred and uYandisa and the likes of Fosetu, they were leading that song. That as the managers of the university, do we pay attentive attention to the lyrical context of that song? Iti noba sekugubi, noba besidubula, and literally they were biting bullets. But the song yayisithi noba besidubula kodwa siyaya. Kumane uthi qatha ezonkumbulo ezingqondweni zethu xa sibona ukuthi amandla ayehla okanye institutions of this nature, they want to absorb us. But we remember those songs. Uba yey noba kubi noba besidubula kodwa siyaya phambili. So ndifuna ukuthi ke nakubantu abatsha balapha I love your jerseys, by the way. I love the red jerseys. Can we give them a round of applause? You are very bright and you are beautiful. Sinimeme ngenjongo ke uba nibe lapha. Njengoba bendisithi ngobhuti nosisi aba ebendifudula ndisebenza kunye nabo. All of them are now working. I need more people in my space. So this is an invitation to you. Uba idabi lo bhuti nosisi aba nangona bese kwedabini ukwa NYDA ngokuyaphangela ukwi office of Dean of Students uyi lecturer kwa history ungu senior lecturer University of KwaZulu-Land usebuhulumenteni uvuyo. Literally, I don't have people. Ndifuna ukuthi ke likhwelo kunye nani eli as we are having this conversation, please do participate. Sifuna ukwamkela indwendwe zethu ubaba Pedro Mzileni who will be delivering a keynote, as well as all the respondents that will form part of the conversation. Usisu Azania, who was a panelist from our program yesterday. Sifuna ukuthi siyabulela kakhulu kuye wonke umuntu okhoya pha ngaphakathi istaff saseKenred abantu abasinika amandla xa kuphela amandla. Sifuna ukuthi enkosi kakhulu masikhulule ke ibhatyi sonwabe oba uyaziva uyagodola uphinde uyinxibe ibhatyi yakho khona ukuze uzoba comfortable. Ndifuna ukuthi ke ngolo mazwi masiyichaye isaqhuma nangamso. Enkosi. Thank you so much.
We are in the presence of greatness. I told you, look at where they're all sitting. First two rows. Dandi Chilo, we're in the presence of greatness, honestly. The people that will be delivering the keynotes, our respondent, our panelists, are all people I hold in high regard because of their minds, because of the way they speak, because of the information that they share and the ways in which they empower us. I couldn't be prouder to be introducing our next speaker, actually, our keynote address speaker. Now, Dr. Pedro Mzileni is very well known. But I have to introduce him in any case because it only makes sense, politely so, to do that. Dr. Pedro Mzileni is a senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology at the University of Zululand in South Africa. His research is focused on decolonial theory, grassroots movements, political education, and higher education studies. He also writes columns for Al Jazeera English International and Pambazuga News Africa. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Dr. Pedro Mzileni. Do you want to move this? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Ninja. Namdi Apila. How much time do I have? 1 hour? Okay, 45 to an hour, okay. Don't worry, I will make it as interesting as possible, right? Thank you for inviting me to give this input, and I see learners in school uniforms. Okay, so let us then begin. I've been invited to talk on the 10-year reflection decade of His Must Fall. But I've also titled the paper here as Ongoing Coloniality, Remembering Roads Must Fall. I really hope you have notebooks in front of you because I want to be engaged on the things I'm going to say. So, the Roads Must Fall episode was more of an anti-colonial movement in South Africa. It was not necessarily about fees or about Rhodes the statue. It was more of an anti-colonial movement to essentially destroy colonial rule completely in the battlefield. So in other words, it's not disconnected from other anti-colonial struggles that have been waged by black people in this part of the world since the arrival of settlers, recorded at least as far back as the 17th century. Therefore, Roads Must Fall provided us with three major lessons in the international history of decolonial struggles. One, colonial rule is supposed to be destroyed by the oppressed in direct combat on the battlefield. Two, when colonial rule is directly challenged with violence and suffocated close to its death, it tends to mutate and invents new methods to survive as coloniality. So when you attack colonial systems, they like to pretend as if they are defeated, or they pretend as if they are dead. How many of you know a person in the WWE called The Undertaker? You know The Undertaker, right? Every WrestleMania, he is dead. SummerSlam, he wakes up again. Right? So colonial rule has that tendency. Every time it is attacked, it pretends as if it is dead. When it pretends to be dead, it mutates and invents new methods of surviving again as coloniality. I will come back to explain that concept later on. 3, the battle, therefore, against coloniality now is epistemic and utmost difficult. And it requires a resilient attitude from the oppressed that says, the struggle is never over. A luta continue. So once the colonizer comes back now as the undertaker, as coloniality, there is only one place now where it gets left behind to continue surviving. It is in the mind, the psyche of the oppressed. Coloniality is in the mind of the oppressed. It is working, it is most difficult to wrestle against. Right? Therefore, at all material times, when you are waging a struggle, you must never say the struggle is over. You must always be on a momentum that says, aluta continua. So in other words, if you defeat colonial rule at one moment, your next question must always be, because ayifiland. Aluta continua. The minute you think you have arrived and you've defeated it, it will show you as coloniality again when it resurrects, to renew its problems, to show you once more that when you thought you have arrived, your struggle is incomplete. Therefore, I will situate these 3 lessons on reflecting on the Rhodes Must Fall chapter in South African student mobilization histories for freedom and total liberation on 4 sections. The first section will trace its historical origins from the political economy of South Africa. The second section will underscore how the political economy shaped higher education. The third section reflects on the inevitable Rhodes Must Fall movement and its combat against colonial higher education. The final section tables Rhodes Must Fall vision for a liberated university in Azania. Right? Rhodes Must Fall was not only a protest movement for no particular reason. Rhodes Must Fall was an intellectual movement as well. In fact, all movements waged by the oppressed against colonial rule, they are always intellectual movements. Because black people, women, the poor, none of them protests without a reason. No protest happens without a reason. There's always a reason. And reasons for a protest are conceptualized at the level of ideas behind the mobilization of the protest. Right? So when people say to you, these students are just protesting for no reason, that is not true. There's always thought, ideas, theories, and concepts invented before a protest is waged. And Rhodes Must Fall was such a movement. So this will now pave the way to explain, therefore, how did initiatives like Mfundi become born in the middle of that struggle. Now, before further I begin, I just want to make 4 epistemic clarities. One, when I refer to Rhodes Must Fall, I also include its descendant, Fees Must Fall, which is the same movement spearheaded and spread across the 2015 academic year in South African higher education, aimed at challenging coloniality directly, which is the social and economic exclusions in place that handicapped black aspiration. 1. 2, Rhodes Must Fall is not disconnected from broader anti-colonial struggles waged by the oppressed since the arrival of settlers. I've explained that point. Thirdly, Rhodes Must Fall is rooted on intellectual freedoms and the revolutionary praxis. I've explained that point. And then fourthly and lastly, the chapter of Rhodes Must Fall in the Nelson Mandela University campus and in every other campus around the colony, listen to this carefully. The chapter of Rhodes Must Fall in the Nelson Mandela University campus and in every other campus around the colony is still at its early stages of study. And therefore, what I will deliver today is an abridged and tiny version of a broader and contested story that is yet to be investigated to its fullest. So I am not the authority of the story. I'm not the only one who owns the story. I'm just part of a tiny section of the story. In fact, the story is still in its early stages of study and investigation. So I am inviting whoever is here and listening online to take an active part in documenting the story of Must Fall at the Mandela campus, because it's a huge archive that is still at its early stages of study. Now I'm just making a contribution. So let's start together with the historical origins. Yesterday, I spoke of the university as being a contested site of struggle with internal and external contradictions. What I didn't have time to expand on regarding this point is that the university is not only an academic enterprise, but it is also a political organ that fulfills a function of cultural socialization. In other words, those who obtain formal higher education, they also get to adopt the cultural civilization of the ruling class behind the delivery of that higher education. So a university is not entirely about imparting skills. That's only a small part of it. The bigger project of the university is to plant a particular culture in you, to create a particular soul, a particular mindset in you. And that soul, culture, and mindset is the one of the ruling class that is in charge of delivering that higher education to you. So schools and universities are not innocent, neutral institutions. They are rather sites of struggle for political power. Are we together? So let's get to South Africa on how the ruling class was constructed and where do universities fit into the picture. South Africa is a settler colony, meaning a group of white people, specifically from Europe, invaded this part of the world around the 17th century. They found people living on this land successfully with their own social institutions in place, running their lives successfully with their own social, economic, and legal systems in place. Are you with me? When the European arrived, it dispossessed people here on this land by killing them and taking their land, right? In that process, the people it found here, it racialized them. It said, we as Europeans look like we are white in color. And you as the people who are here, you are black in color. Now, pay attention to these colors, because these two colors are fabrications, Mos. Can you stand up, Susan? Can you see the jersey that she's wearing? What color is it? It's white. Is there any person in the world who has that skin color? No. If your skin color is the color of that jersey, you should be in hospital. Right? So white is not necessarily a skin of anybody. Right? White is a decision they took that we as the ones from Europe who are more or less pink, we will refer to ourselves as white. White, Mos, is the color of light, the color of peace, whatever you choose to represent the color with. Then those they found here, they said, you guys are black. Now, can you see me standing? This jacket I'm wearing, what color is it? It's black. Is there any person in the world with a skin color that looks like this? No. If your skin color is like this, you should be in hospital. Right? So they chose black. At the back, bayakhombana bathi nguwe. Right? Now, what is the color black associated with? Darkness, right? What else? Witchcraft, poverty. I want you to keep these concepts in mind. Darkness, poverty, witchcraft. Ne? Write them down. Write them down. So those are the social fabrications associated with the color black. Now, when they took land as the white Europeans from the black people, I want to ask you a question today. But what is land? Because when we speak about land in lecture halls or on radio or on TV, you guys immediately switch off because you think this thing is something complicated. Let's explain land so that people understand the connections of land with your education, land with the university, so that you understand. By the way, what I'm about to say, there are people who are professors, my own colleagues, who don't quite grasp it. So if you grasp it today, you'll be amongst the advanced Africans who understand their existential problem. So what is land? Let me ask you a simple question. What time is it now? 10 minutes before? 7 minutes before 11. How many meals have you eaten today? Others are saying 1, others are saying 2, others are saying 0. No? How many sips of water have you had today? There's water in front of you, no? Fine. 4th sip. Okay. The food you were eating this morning, or the 3 meals you had yesterday, where do they come from? They come from the land. Right? So you survived yesterday with 3 meals a day from food that grows from the land. You are surviving today listening to me at 11 because this morning you had something to eat from the land. Right? So in other words, the land provides you with the means of life. In other words, again, land is nature. Right? So you need nature in order to eat. In order to what? To survive. Are you with me? Human beings eat food from the land in order to survive on a daily basis. So you can't survive a day without having a connection with land, at least to eat. Are you with me? Now, when Europeans take land from you, what have they taken from you? It means they have taken from you the means of life. Right? They have taken from you nature, something central to your survival as a human being. Nature. But as Africans, we don't only use land to eat. We use land for every single function of African life. Right? When they ask you, where do you point? You point on a piece of land somewhere. When they ask you ngubani isiduko sakho, ndingundlovu zidle ekhaya kuba solo umalusi, umalunga, umancoba, umntungwa. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a territory of land where I come from. Are you with me? So in other words, your identity and your spirit and your daily survival is deeply connected to the land. You are not human without the land. Now, when the European takes land from you, what have they taken from you? Your entire means of life. Are you with me? I hope you are writing. Keep that in mind. Sisaya ku roads must fall and Buwa Mfundi. I'm just now creating these connections for you to understand them deeply. Now, when African people were cut off from the means of life, and they were racialized black, it means now the land is in the hands of the white European, isn't it? Now that you've lost the land and the means of life, what was the remaining option left for an African to live? It was for an African now to become labor. Now that you've lost land, the means of life, the only remaining option now for you to live and survive was to now use your labor power to survive. In other words, ukuxuthwa komhlaba from Africans was the beginning of African people becoming abasebenzi. So when African people wake up in the morning and say, "Nisayopangela," they are talking about the legacy of dispossession. Right? Because now, the primary thing about being labor is you must submit yourself to exploitation in order to survive. Are you with me? So in other words, let's go back to the European now with land. Now that the European has stolen land, and can you see how big the territory of South Africa is? It's huge. They didn't steal land without a purpose. They wanted to use land to cultivate the resources of the land. And the resources of the land are always two. It's minerals and farming on it. So the food and the minerals for production. But when you have vast areas of land, in order to cultivate minerals and food, you need what? Labor to do that, isn't it? So that was the beginning, therefore, of the labor process on Africans, particularly a system of slavery, right? To cultivate and work the land as cheap labor. Are you with me? The reason why city there's a system of capitalism, and others call it racial capitalism. It is because now you have a labor system in place from people who've lost land, who must work as black people, working for who? Working for white Europeans who own the means of production in order to get cheap proceeds called wages in return. That's why, again, in the colony of South Africa, we have something called racial capitalism, because those who own the means of production and land are white, and those who are labor are black. From losing land again, African people became cheap labor, the slaves. They were the ones cleaning toilets. They were the ones washing the underwears of white people. Right? They were the ones sweeping the streets of the colony as cheap labor because they have been dispossessed. Let me ask you a simple question today, because many people in this country said in 1994 the colonial system was defeated. You remember how I began? It likes to pretend as if it is dead, it's the undertaker. Let me ask you a question. Today, in Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth, in any school, any university, any shopping mall, who cleans the toilets today? It's black people. And not just black people, but that labor is also gendered. It's not just black people, but specifically it's black women. When you were entering this campus, who was the security at the gate? A black person. When you go across the freeway, who cleans the streets? It's black people. Which year is it? 2025. Who was cleaning toilets in the 17th century? Black people. Who's cleaning toilets in 2025? Black people. That is why, again, the city, colonialism did not die. It pretended to be dead and re-emerged as coloniality today. So South Africa is not a democracy. South Africa is a neo-colony. Let me pass that historical present lesson. It's not history, it's the science of today. You know, people say history is about the past. I'm repeating the point yesterday. There's no Chinese wall between the past, the present, and the future. They are all connected to each other. They reinforce each other. Right? In fact, when I started talking, it was 20 minutes ago. It's already part of history. So history is not about the past. History, actually, it's about the future. Because when white people say to you don't have a history, they are essentially saying you don't have knowledge to shape the future. Right? So when people say run away from history, be careful. They're actually saying run away from shaping the future. All right. I think I've now explained that whole thing. So now let's come to PE, Gqeberha, the Cape, just to draw how it came up to be what it is. So, 1886. Hope you have notebooks, mostly. A Berlin conference set in Germany where a group of white people, abangamaphara, amaginza, decided to take Africa and put on the table like cake. You know almost how you cut cake during a birthday. But show me, nayaki piece, show me, nayaki piece. In fact, you know almost when you cut cake, you always cut it with equal pieces, right? So that it's neat. Amaginza ke, 1886, they put Africa like a cake on the table, then they cut each other pieces. What were those pieces? It was borders, countries. 1886, the division of Africa into nation states was finalized. Ne? They were doing that essentially to complete the process of dispossession, because it was difficult to completely dispossess Africans without dividing them. Right? Must divide them. Make Africans believe that they are different, then it will be easier to dominate them. Right? 2 years later, they came across gold in the Witwatersrand. White people like to say we discovered things. They didn't discover anything. They came across badibana nayo. There was gold reserves in the Witwatersrand. Precious material of wealth. Then they started to fight amongst each other for that resource. Not only gold, but they were fighting amongst each other for the land. Primarily, although they came as Europeans to colonize, primarily there were two leading white tribes that were doing this process. One, the Dutch, which renamed itself today as the Afrikaner or the Boer. Primarily they are the Dutch from Holland. Two, it was the British. There were many others, but those two were primarily the two white leading tribes in that war. They fought each other in 1899 up to 1902. for who will control the land between the two of them and its minerals. So Amapara I2 are fighting inside your house to determine about le TV na le cell phones izoyiba apha izawuphuma nabani kule ndlu. So wena ngokudibana nabe kitchen ba ayibo amaphara endlini nami. Right? So when you talk to white people, you must refer to that war as a war of Amapara, the most useless war ever, because they were fighting for things that did not belong to neither of them. Right? It was Amapara. Labethwa ke ipara from the Dutch, lawina ipara lase Britain. 1902. I'm not sure if you've seen fight yotsotsi before, but it is ruthless. Thina ke we didn't care because otsotsi must kill each other, no problem. Babulalana ke. But after fighting with each other, they had one common agreement between them, and that common agreement was the native. Ne? The agreement between them was, what do we do with a black person? Ne? They agreed in 1902 that primarily, although Singamapara were both fighting, we are white people together. And one thing we have in common is we must be superior to the blacks that we have invaded in this colony. Therefore, let us reconcile and unite as white people. That was 1902 when they signed the Treaty of Vereeniging. But because the British kaloku in the reconciliation was the one who won, right? In the formation of their reconciliation, it was the British Act of Parliament in 1909 that resolved to start a union of South Africa in 1910, led by these two white Mapara, but with the British in charge, which is the South Africa we have today. Are you with me? Now, is South Africa again created by these two white paras? They divided it into 4 provinces. Write that down. I'm coming now to Gqeberha and Fismasville. They divided it into 4 provinces. 2 each. Yabomba mapara aya hlulelana. 2 each. Natal and the Cape for the British. The Orange, Free State and the Transvaal for the Dutch. In case you didn't know, Free State was called Orange Free State first. Why orange? Because orange is the color of the royal family in Holland. If some of you watch football, the Netherlands, what is the color of their kit? It's orange. That's why Free State was called Orange Free State. Can you see that this thing of white people calling themselves Afrikaners is they are Europeans, Dutch people. So, you had Cape and Natal for the British, Transvaal and Orange Free State for the Dutch. Cape is where we are, which after 94 was only split into 3. So they changed the Cape in 1994 into 3. Northern Cape, Western Cape, and Eastern Cape. Before 94, it was one province called the Cape. In Natal, it had homelands called KwaZulu. After 94, they changed it to a province called KwaZulu Natal. The Orange Free State, they only removed orange. Today, it's called Free State. So what's the difference between South Africa today and South Africa of 1910? No difference. It is the undertaker It pretended to be dead, but it is alive. Masiza Gqeberha, PE. The poor Dutch defeated by the British. They were working Shembetuna as cleaners, as domestic workers, as mine workers. Bebengamaphara to the core, working for the British as cheap labor. Then they were hit by a recession in 1929 that made them even more poor. Right? Then, DeForce Malan. DeForce Malan has a school in King Williamstown named after him. He was the Minister of Education in the 1920s. He took a decision to establish what is called a PE Technical College, started in 1912. Right? It was opened at Russell Road up at Central, where there was South Point, Esa Stratus Nyugaso, Russell Road. DeForce Malan, 1925, opened a PE Technical College with the intention to train white people how to change taps, how to fix an engine. Can you see the jobs they were doing? White historians claim that the PE Technical College, Comradeville, was started in 1882 as a PE School of Art, which is not true. That PE School of Art was just a room, Miriam, a white woman. You see, white people, they like to say their things started 100 years ago, since 1882, since 1851. Do you notice that? Go to any building or any clothing or any perfume you use. They like to put there since 1945, since 1882. It's fabricated years. What they're trying to do by doing that is to present themselves as if they were people who've been here for a long time. Right? So that on the land question, they can try to indigenize themselves. You get my point? So PE Technical College was not established in 1882 by Axoka. It was only established in 1925, which is exactly 100 years ago today. So into is all. Let me fast forward. 1968, it became PE College for Advanced Technical Education. In 1975, the PE Council in Summerstrand moved it to a land given by a PE Council, which is now called North Campus. Lay opposite the road, 1975. It was officially opened by the Minister of National Education, J.P. van der Spuy. And it was divided into two divisions: technology for white men, humanities for white women. White women must be secretaries, and then the men must run the offices. Hence, in the city, colonial rule was not only racialized, but was also gendered. Fast forward, masiye kwi-UPE, a South Campus. It was launched in 1964 in June, where the Broederbond sent a secret communique to the white community, asking white people to ensure that white students enroll in the UPE as much as possible, especially those who speak Afrikaans. The first vice-chancellor was Professor E.J. Marey, who was also executive member of the Broederbond. The first chancellor was Thomas Rupert, utataka Johann Rupert, lo ebese Oval Office 2 days ago. right? Although UPE was started in 1964, the truth, Ndagaveli, was that it was started actually from a secret meeting in 1961 that took place at State Leril Farm near St. Francis Bay when you pass Humansdorp. So it was discussed on a farm that we need a university for Afrikaans-speaking white people in PE. Why PE? Because primarily, Afrikaners, the Dutch, felt like there is a domination of the English, British-speaking white people in the economy. But also, they were dominating in higher education through Rhodes University in Grahamstown. So Rhodes University opened a campus in PE called Bed Street. The Bed Street campus lay by Central. It started as a campus of Rhodes University. The English were extending themselves to PE from Grahamstown. Then, in 1961, Rhodes wanted to expand further, and they were sold land in the Drift Sands, EP. It's this land now called South Campus. This was a coastal jungle. It was sold to Rhodes University by the PE Municipal Council for R2. R2. The National Party, represented by Hendrik Verwoerd, felt like no man, Rhodes University is expanding too quickly with the British-English hegemony. Then they waged a war with the United Party to expropriate this land from the British back into the hands of the National Party and the apartheid state. Then they built the UPE, which today is called South Campus. So a South Campus essentially was built as UPE from a land grab by the apartheid National Party state from the British United Party. Land grab. So universities, on how they were built, do not separate them from the legacy of land dispossession. They are connected to each other fundamentally. I wish I would go on to Vista all the way up to the 90s, but let me skip that because the chairperson is saying I'm left now with only 20 minutes. Let's come get to 2005. UPE merges now with PE Technikon and Vista in Missionville, called today Missionville Campus. They merge together and they form what is called Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. Let me explain Missionville Campus quickly so that you get the full context. In the 60s, white people started to intensify the building of homelands, Bantustans, right? So as Europeans were colonizing South Africa, they wanted South Africa, guys, write this down. They wanted South Africa to be a white country. Ne? They wanted South Africa to be a European country. That is white. That was the agenda. Wipe South Africa clean and make it a white country. So across all the benches, Upper Central, Humud, Unyuge, all the way, there were benches written Europeans only. So, to do that, they had to wipe black people out of the surface of the land, push them further away to places called homelands. In the Cape, you had the homelands as two. 1, Ciskei. 2, Transkei. Right? In Natal, you had pockets of homelands called KwaZulu. In the Free State, Orange Free State, you had homelands called Bophuthatswana and Qwaqwa. And then in the Transvaal, you had homelands called KwaNdebele, KwaNgwane, KwaVenda, Lebowa, and Gazankulu. This is where black people were pushed to reside. Homelands were also deeply tribalized or ethnicized. In other words, it was now the intensification of not only pushing black people to homelands as black people, but divide black people further according to language. So if ungumXhosa, you must reside in one homeland. If ungumZulu, you must reside in your own homeland. The agenda behind that was to make black people see each other as different as much as possible to divide them. So if ungumXhosa, you must see yourself as different from umntu othetha isiZulu, which are jokes today that are still being reinforced on social media. People introduce themselves that mna ametswana han. Would you date a Xhosa man? I said to you, coloniality pretends to be like the undertaker. It pretends to be dead, but it is still alive. Right? Not only did they do that division, but they built universities inside their homelands through the 1959 Extension Universities Act. Yabona, if you are a student in a university, please go open and read that act. Because that act is at the center of the destruction of black intellectuals in South Africa. The Extension Universities Act of 1959 turned institutions like Iforte from being a university opened to the globe where you had the likes of Mugabe, Ian Khama studying there, no Chrisani. After 1959, it became a Xhosa-speaking university completely. Zululand became a Zulu-speaking university completely. Teflo became a Venda-speaking university completely. Qwaqwa became a Sotho-speaking university completely. So tribalism was being transferred to at the level of higher education viciously by the apartheid regime. But most importantly, these tribal universities, they were being cut off from intellectual life. Research was not encouraged. Theorizing was not encouraged. Critical international research and excellence was not being encouraged. In fact, lecturers, professors, administrators, and directors in homeland universities were white Afrikaner men. So this thing of white people seeing themselves as supervisors and thinkers for black people, it's an old historical problem in South Africa. Right? So 2005, the post-colonial government decided to merge universities in these colonies. But it was merging primarily homeland universities with technicons. Right? Technicons, guys, were created from 1979 onwards as second-class institutions to enroll white people abango domkoop. Right? So if you were white and you couldn't get into UCT and VETS, they created technicons for you. Because when you are white, kawufunde something man obudom. Kawube busy. Right? So the new government merged homeland institutions with technicons. Where we are is part of that merging. UPE, Technicon, and Vista merged to form Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. The key word in 2005 for this university was metropolitan. Metropolitan meant that this university will be attached to the neoliberal agenda of the global city, right? So graduates from this institution must be appealing to the global market. So Nelson Mandela Metro University advanced Eurocentric neoliberal education unashamedly as a sign of excellence at that time. Let me return to South Africa as a settler colony in 1994. Must be 1994. I hope you're writing down. I'm now left with 13 minutes. From all nation states in Africa, write that down. I'm telling you about the uniform. From all nation states in Africa, South Africa was the last one to obtain independence from colonial rule. Right? Most African countries got independence from colonial rule in the 1960s, specifically 1960, because 1960, a total of 17 African countries obtained independence. Ne? 1975, Mozambique obtained independence. 1980, Zimbabwe obtained independence. 1990, Namibia obtained independence. Then, the last one, 1994, was South Africa. So in South Africa, independence, ifike only yesterday. Independence was just 5 minutes ago in South Africa. So in South Africa, questions of whiteness, neoliberalism, globalization, Eurocentrism are still going to be confusing concepts for the next few years because your independence was only 5 minutes ago. Right? Now, the implications of that for higher education were, can this noise be switched off? Hey. It's a noise of coloniality. Okay. Whilst they are trying to switch it off here. So let me explain. So in 1994, South Africa obtained its independence as the last nation state in Africa. But 1994 was a period when the global world system had neoliberalism taking off, which is capitalism. But as South Africa, you were also a settler white European colony, as I explained. In other words, the white people who oppressed you are sitting right next to you in your own land, right? With institutions of higher learning built on the same land to advance the colonial project. So University of South Africa essentially had two converging problems. One, whiteness and Eurocentrism dominating the epistemic project, and then neoliberalism dominating the political economy of higher education, right? So knowledge and the economy of the university were under white power in South Africa. Now, the ingredients that triggered fees must fall on my last 10 minutes. Let's start up a Mandela, because that is where I want to focus on. I enrolled here in 2013. Oh, thank God. I enrolled here in 2013. I'm now revealing my age. 2013, I arrived. Let me describe the campus picture so that you get the idea why fees must fall happened. 2013, nationally in South Africa, the Liberal Democratic Alliance, the DA, was on a steady rise at that time. If you think back in 2013. 2013 was also the era that I would say was the beginning of the collapse of the African National Congress as a hegemony. This is the era of the Nkandla spectacle. You remember that period? 2013. The implications of that period, where there was a contestation between the liberal right and the center left in the ANC, right, played itself out on campus with the popularity of DASO from 2011 up to 2015 at least. Right? It was an era where black young people were attracted to being coconuts at that time. There was a strong assimilation to whiteness, right? This was on the campus, but also in the curriculum. There was a liberal direction at that time. But not only in the classroom, even on the campus itself, campus life was privatized. The food system was run by a private company called FedEx, which was selling high prices to students, unhealthy meals, on limited NSFAS budgets that were not enough to last for the whole semester, but also they were arriving late to students. Apparently, that is still happening today. 2, the security system was privatized. You had a company called Masakane, or Masikanye, not sure the name, but it was paying extremely low wages to security guards on campus, making them work for 12 hours. And in the residence, they would fall asleep whilst on duty. So if you're a student, you are coming from studying at 10 o'clock at night, a security guard at your res is sleeping at the door. Because they are grossly underpaid, they work long hours. 3, cleaners, who were also under a private company. One res with 300 students had 1 cleaner. So residences were filthy, unattended to, and those cleaners would ask us for money to go home 3 days after their payday. So they get paid on Monday. On Wednesday, they're asking us as students in res to donate money for them to have a bus fare to travel between the township and the campus. I'm trying to describe to you the conditions of black cheap labor on this campus, the privatization of student life on this campus, and the precarious, inhumane conditions that students were staying under on this campus. 2013 was the beginning of that revolt because I think we had a high number of students who joined the university that year who were coming from the Youth League and other black-orientated student organizations. That created the momentum, and I think SASCO won elections in 2013. But DASO returned again. Then 2015, I'm trying to sum up as I'm wrapping up, 2 minutes left. 2015, I think I will come back to others during Q&A. 2015, the momentum, as what many people don't know, as UCT had a Rhodes Must Fall and the Sharkville protests in the first semester of 2015, we also had two big protests in this university in the first semester of 2015. One of them was the International Anti-Xenophobia campaign, and then the next one was also a campaign for free registration. This is 2015. When the statue fell at Rhodes and we overlapped to the Fees Must Fall campaign at Wits, on this side of the world, that momentum also switched over primarily through a student-worker alliance protests. In Mandela, the protests for free education were intertwined with workers who were calling for the decommodification of the campus economy and privatization on campus, so that you free workers and make them become insourced, so that they can work alongside professors with the same benefits. This was all an attempt to end racialized apartheid wage scales. 21 November 2015, a special council sat and it resolved on insourcing and the introduction of the phasing in of free education. Primarily, the organizations that were at the forefront of these protests, you had the EFF Student Command, SASCO, the Black Students Stokvel, and some independent black feminist networks, not DASO. DASO opposed the fees must fall and supported the 6% fee increase recommended by government. That is in the history books. Those protests, again, primarily, as I wrap up now, they were intellectual movements driven through dialogues in residences, in bus shuttles, in midnight meetings, in the exchange of pamphlets, in underground political education sessions, in residences, in chambers, with workers, with community organizations, with political activists, but also including other progressive scholars in the university, like Mr. Sonwabo Stierman at Kenrad, who availed facilities for activists to convene and strategize on how to continue the movement for roads and fees must fall. Mfundi emerged as part of that tradition of discussing political strategies intellectually in the underground, conscientizing students quietly so that in the morning management can wake up and there's a shutdown. All that shutdown, when it happens at 5 a.m., it was being planned properly throughout the night through quiet political education amongst all these centers where students are found. Mfundi as a name, Mfundi, as I sit down. Bua came from a weekly newsletter, but also a weekly seminar run by the Young Communist League called Bua Thursday. We were having that conversation as all these colleagues were here at the front, but there was also another colleague called Snazo Mchengu. We said we can't necessarily call it Bua Thursday. Besides, Thursday is a very busy day of the week in the university where there are too many lectures for students. So we're going to have these sessions actually on Friday morning. But we can't call it Bua Friday. Friday is too casual, and Friday to students means something else. But we will keep Bua. Now, the second name, called Mfundi, emerged particularly from the women in the space. Timbizile Osnazo is one of them. Mfundi, firstly, the word Mfundi, is not concentrated in the university. It's not academic. In fact, to be Mfundi, you don't have to be registered. Ukufunda mos, it's something anyone can do anywhere. In fact, ukufunda, it's not to read, right? Or to be taught. Ukufunda actually is a pedagogy. Because a person who preaches in church, they are called umfundisi, right? So funda is a deinstitutionalized pedagogical concept of African people that encompasses everything and anything that has to do with conscientization. That is why we arrived at the African name with 2 African languages that even spread beyond these 2 African languages, called Bua Mfundi. Thank you very much.
Everybody has their books out. I can tell this was a very informative session. You learned a lot about the history of our country. You've also realized a lot of things that are happening in society. And now you're able to distinguish and understand that coloniality still lives. What is coloniality? The undertaker. A dead body that continues to rise and mutate into different things. And now we have a brilliant mind who is going to respond to this very powerful keynote. Azania Kyali does not want embellishments when being introduced. So the only thing I can do is welcome this brilliant mind so that they can impart information that is going to change your life and alter the way in which you move. Please help me in welcoming Azania.
Thank you so much, Manbulise Kwakhona. You know, I'm a person who's at school as well, who's also in the art, right? And I think the movement as well incorporated okanye art kakhulu, you know, that is through our singing in the space and so on, you know, which of course detailed existential crisis in a way. But before I speak, I want us to do that exercise so that even the younger ones, man, can have that break, because ukuhlala phansi ixesha elide and utyise, you know. So there's a beautiful song which was sang even during the Fizmos Fall moment. And I think most of you might know it because it's there on social media as well, and it's also sang by Ipupo Likabiko. But in a way, the song, right, on its own, it was a song that we used to revive our spirits because we could not make sense of as black bodies. So the only way that we could at times, it would be to just sit down, you know, conceptualize on these things while we are breaking bread and singing as comrades. So the song is Uthixo khona, Uthixo khona bagerila, Uthixo khona, Uthixo khona bagerila. Ile kwa kerilayo, abayazi misebenzi yabo. Ile kwa kerilayo, mama wo uzasambe. Uthixo khona, Uthixo khona machita. Uthixo khona, Uthixo khona machita. Oh ile kwa kerilayo, abayazi misebenzi yabo. Ile kwa kerilayo, mama o zasambe. Thank you so much for that. I thought I would just do that so that at least the house is you know. I think I prepared this response as the doc was speaking here. And indeed, what a mouthful one, doc, you know. The saddest part about speaking after such profound engagement is that you also don't want to find yourself wanting uqamze tete here and there, you know. But in actual fact, I think one of the most beautiful things that I picked up, you know, insofar as the doc's presentation is concerned, is that it is how he articulates, you know, the Fizz Must Fall movement with the Rhodes Must Fall movement, of course. And I use the Fizz Must Fall movement because it's something that is close to home. Because as the doc says, when the Rhodes Must Fall movement, you know, in a way, I don't want to use the word dies out, but when it mutates itself or extends itself, it becomes the Fizz Must Fall movement. I'm part of that generation of the Fizz Must Fall, based upon the location in which I was based upon, which is university in Jonagolun, Paikapak. But of course, one of the most interesting things is that this was a very important moment in the history of the South African political landscape. Because as Doc puts it perfectly, right, that the saddest reality that we find ourselves within this colonial or settler coloniality of South Africa, it is just how these things, or coloniality on its own, you know, undertakes itself, you know. And of course, I also appreciate the fact that even how you position it or locate it, you do not only just locate it within that moment, because the history of resistance in South Africa or the history of insurgents in South Africa, it is not a history that just comes with us as the Fizz Must Fall moment, but we also borrow from history. This is to say that we are borrowing from history as well, simply based on the fact that, again, the existential crisis there too has not changed as a people. So the university, of course, it is going to become that precursor because, as Udok has said, of the epistemic violence that transpires in the space, you know, and I think that's the simplest of ways that I can put it, right? And of course, he also reveals how the movement on its own joins, you know, or speaks of and is inclusive of the labor force within the spaces, right? He draws and calls us home in the example that it makes insofar as majority or primarily who are still laborers within South Africa. And of course, the genderedness of the labor system in our country, you know. And of course, sometimes we think these things are not systematic, you know, and we get carried away with them, you know, and we embrace the titles of them, such as single motherhood and so on. But these things are deeply entrenched and rooted within the system. And of course, another thing that I appreciate the most is the fact that he shows us how university spaces as platforms of radical change and also how equally they necessitate that we take the discourse not only to the, or confine it to the spaces, but also be able to take it outside of the spaces. I'm reminded of this simply because the movement that we are from, or the movement that it speaks of, it is equally funded on 3 pillars which are most important. But the pillar that I want to touch upon is the Black consciousness pillar, you know, coined by Otatu Biko and the others. I mean, what becomes important with the Black consciousness is that as we read from it and take it and put it into the movement, it is the importance then of how we take these struggles there to and not confine them into university, right, and take them to outside. I'm reminded also equally of a time in the Western Cape where students came together with a community, a space was created, and this was a way of extending the struggle outside of the university spaces into Quilombo. You know, a Quilombo, directly translated, is a runaway place for slaves, adapted in Brazil, right? So the primary reason of those, equally once again, it was to say that itabi labantu, as though siliqalile at university, we were mere just torchbearers, but equally, while we're including abazali bethu edabini, they were also a part of the larger society in which we come from, you know. And equally, we needed to go to that terrain, which is the community, so that equally, the Fees Must Fall movement does not only become confined into the university space, but also not because of that. It is because of, again, coloniality within the spaces and how it mutates itself, because what happens then in the movement is the counter-insurgency from the state, right? I'm going to ask the kids, how many of you know of the Zondo Commission? Kubantwana besikolo. Nayazi Zondo Commission. And yazi Zondo Commission. So Zondo Commission is this commission eyaqalwayo post the presidency eKatata Msholozi, right? Kazuma. But the primary aim, it was to interrogate corruption in South Africa, right? But the most beautiful thing is that it exposes, therefore, how the state was counter-insurgency, in that 84 million is spent to counter the movement because the movement gets spied upon by the state. So the resistance then became important, that as you confine in the university, because again, students are people in transition. Not only are they people in transition, but also the counterinsurgency came with a lot of arrests, Mfundi and so on. So this was not new, you know, as Doc is trying to show us, you know. And also because we had borrowed again grammar from, you know, historic movements of our suffering, you know. Hence, in the movement, then even the language, esisebenzisayo, is the working class language, you know. And just to move it further, I'm so sorry because so once again, the movement does not just only, you know, contest the space of university, but again, challenges us to think of our relationship or relations with South Africa as an unethical polity, right? And again, as Prof. or Dr. Mzileni, why am I calling you Prof? Something is cooking. Something is cooking, you know. But I think the post must fall moment, you know, is a moment that is characterized by many elements. And I think I fully concur with him insofar as that there's still an ongoing work insofar as this is concerned, because there's many angles in which the movement needs to be studied upon, because also the movement also influences the politics of the country insofar as the gender question is concerned, you know. The issues of rape are put into the table. Like, so such things are rehashed by the movement. So what I'm trying to get to then is that even how then the roads must fall movement starts, as I said earlier, that language esisebenzisayo ayo language ibintsha, because into yokuqala kozabalwaza eSouth Africa ayonto intsha. So, unipha nje history encinci nani. I think it's in 20, but I'm in high school also at that time. There's something that happens in South Africa. I think inoba nani-2 nina okanye 4 ngela xesha. But uAndile Lili and Loyiso Nkohla, they take poo, ikaka. Because even the statue, we use and throw poo on the statue. There's somewhere where I'm getting with this, right? this again goes to the grammar esasibolekile. It was not originally ours, but it's a grammar that we had to borrow because, again, the very same spaces that we're in, they were very much reflective of the exclusion yethu as black bodies. So we had to bring ubuntu bethu or conditions zethu to this space and contest in that space. So the throwing of the poo in the statue is taken from what Andile Lili and Loyiso Nkosha do, because Western Cape is an unequal space. Kunamagali, that's the language you use by Nasemont. Kunamagali, which is a Matyotyombe. So Kunamatyotyombe, and the other side is a very white colonial setup. In the most sinister of spaces, whilst Abelungu Bona still live in affluent spaces, right? So within the spaces, black people get to be dignified in that. Bafakelwa ipota-pota. You know what ipota-pota does. Even as you walk, I'm sorry for this language, but abantwana elokushini ikaka badlala nayo, like it's just here in front of your face. The drainage system ilapha uyayitsiba xa usiya esikolweni, you know. Even nje the heinous smell ukunuka kwendawo ohlala kuyo, you know, is a reflection of into yoba awungomntu as per how you were positioned nendawo obekwe kuyo kakade, you know. So as we take that and throw it into the statue, it is precisely the language that I'm saying that we borrowed from the working class, right? Which is Oli Lingela Klesha, that they were trying to show how the setup of the Western Cape is, but not just of the Western Cape as a province, but just holistically of the country. Because again, the reason that sihlala kwezi ndawo sihlala sukuzo, it's merely because of what? Coloniality. Thank you. So, and again, as we then throw this on the statues and so on, and the resistance that takes place, you know, again, I want to reiterate that it goes back to our history and how we take from that history, because ekugqibeleni ke impilo yethu is still very much reflective of how we were oppressed, man, you know. But in closing, I think what Dr. Mzileni does here, it is to invite us to rethink of activism. It is equally inviting us to rethink of resistance. He's equally inviting us into how do we become agents of change, you know. Uyitshintsha njani uluntu, and there's no other way that you can change indawo ohlala kuyo except outside being an activist and activism, you know. And I qali apha at university level, but it also begins, you know, even in high school, because at the end of the day, the issues that I experience at university, they do not only end there, they are also experienced at basic education level, right? And ithi ke abantwana bam niyovala isikolo ngomso or Monday. Ne? Nindive kakuhle. But I'm just trying to show you the importance of uba lichanhliziyo, an activist. Because uba ngumuntu olichanhliziyo, it means therefore you are not only concerned about you as an individual, but you are concerned about the collective, right? Because as long as you want to liberate yourself as an individual, we are still going to find ourselves within these silly stereotypes that we perpetuate amongst each other, you know, simply because of we are not concerned with the collective. So I think what he does here is to invite us and remind us of the importance of Uresista. I think I'm going to tap it there. Thank you.
Did you see the brilliance I was talking about? Didn't even have to just elaborate on anything. Went in, let you know what it is, and said gracefully. Now we are about to start something. We are about to have a conversation amongst us. But in order for us to have this conversation, we need to invite a few more people. You could see that there's a bunch of couches, right? Yes. So, we are going to be introducing two others who will be joining the panel discussion. Now, I'm going to start with the gentleman. Mr. Thando Soga is the owner and executive member of the company named Beyond the Future Enterprise. He has various experience in the political space as an activist leader in the Fees Must Fall movement at the University of Fort Hare. During his time at the University of Fort Hare, he served as a faculty assistance council member of the Faculty of Science in 2016 and 17. He was then elected to the 2018-19 Student Representative Council as the residence officer. Under his portfolio was the Central Housing Committee, which he served in as its chairperson. After joining Nelson Mandela University in 2022, he was elected and served as the Arts and Culture House Committee member at Claude Ravane Residence. He was then appointed to serve as the committee's acting secretary and was later appointed to serve as the treasurer. From Upala to the money was side-eyeing. Something's calling, but it's not Black Label. During his tenure in the committee, he extended an invitation to partner up with the Ebhlanti program that is facilitated by Mr. Yanga Lusasa. This institutional program is to groom young men into becoming responsible men for the benefit of our student community and society at large. He is an aspiring author, currently working on his book called Tamed, Africa, Free My People. The book is being written with the hope that it will safeguard and spearhead the nation towards an end of the continuous struggle to survive for the betterment of his fellow countrymen. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Thando Soga. Now, the lady that I'm about to introduce, the powerhouse. She traveled very, very far to get here, went through so much. Yandisa Sive Chupase graduated with a BA degree in political science and public administration. Right? No, clap, clap. There's more. And an advanced diploma in business studies with monitoring and evaluation, both from Nelson Mandela University. She is currently enrolled in an honors degree in public administration. She is a former student leader who was highly involved in the Fees Must Fall movement. Yandisa is a social justice activist, youth development practitioner, public speaker, and aspiring scholar. She currently works as an outreach officer and stakeholder liaison in the National Youth Development Agency in the Eastern Cape Provincial Office, okay? She's also been elected as the regional secretary of the ANC Youth League in the Nelson Mandela region. Yes. Sihleli nama secretary. Sphethe o treasurer, lana sphethe ama lecturer. Bona, good dangerous. Bona, you need to work hard. And do you see, apparently they all started at Kenred, so you know, the blessings are falling on me now. I'm the new generation. I would possibly be maybe getting a doctorate. You know, touch a little money, a treasurer or something. But help me in welcoming this amazing panel. We're going to have a conversation amongst all of us, but we're first going to start with opening statements from Ms. Chupase and Mr. Soga. We've heard from Dr. Pedro and Uazania, and then from then on, we will be engaging them with some questions, but I need you also to have questions ready for them. We're going to have a very robust conversation, engaging at that, so please be prepared. In the meantime, I need some assistance, please, from anybody, somebody. Thank you. We are removing the podium. Do you see them properly now? Yes, the couches of brilliance. And it's not because they are white. No. It's because of the black people sitting on them. Right? So, I would like Ms. Chupasip to please begin with her opening statement.
Mandla. Gawethu. Mandla. Gawethu. I start like that intentionally when not Dr. Mzileni. Because I think from time to time, we need to remember that amandla ngawethu. We chant it, but sometimes I believe in Yobana we forget the meaning and the essence of why this chant even exists when azania. Without wasting any time, because I think between Dr. Mzileni and Dr. Now did you talk? Kondezai and Azania. I think what we need to take out in particular is that Fees Must Fall was not sporadic. The narrative that coloniality and whiteness likes to sort of imprint in us is that it was sporadic, it was uncoordinated, ibengabantwana nje abagezayo. But Fees Must Fall was extremely intentional. It was organized. And as Pedro said, it was an intellectual struggle. It sought and it was intersectional in its nature. When we say fees must fall, we are not talking only about access and fees. That's an element of it. But when you speak about fees must fall, what we're fighting for was to see that the institution that we say we are coming into, we must be reflected in it. Because what is very much a reality and what is we were contesting with is the fact that the institutions that we have enrolled to were never made with black people in mind. Now when we're speaking about fees must fall, we're speaking about the need to decolonize and to transform the institutions that we come to that are meant to educate us. We are dealing with what we're dealing with is exclusion in its nature. Mfundi. Sasisithi into yobana the university is a microcosm of society. Xa sithetha nge-microcosm, sithetha ngento yobana i-microcosm is a reflection of what society is. So what is happening in the institution of higher learning is a reflection of broader society. Kuthethiwe ke apha about the history, and I won't go into it. But what is important is that we need to understand in the Yobana Fees Must Fall is an unfinished project. It is something, it's an undertaker. Because if we are to attempt to understand the gains of Fees Must Fall, I think I was speaking to one of the leaders I interact with, or the activists I interact with all the time. And those are just the progress on the university and some of the things that we thought we won. But it seems like there is a reversal of the gains of Fees Must Fall. And what we need to contend with in this room is what should activism look like now? Because the reality is that the institutions have now learned how we do activism. And therefore have become smarter in understanding that protesters for the online class, for example. When we see that there's a protest and they are mobilizing each other, sifaki private security. So we need to understand what should activism look like now, because it does not necessarily mean it's going to look like what it was 10 years ago. Just like coloniality mutates itself through time, activism as well should. And activism must be defined by the generation that is contending with the struggle at the moment. So I think Mandime Apo when I cat, because I can go very far with this thing. But I want us to think together. There's no Messiah here. We're all black people. We are here, all of us, in this institution that was not made with the black child in mind. How do we then interact with that reality and think together? Yes, we have the privilege of perhaps experience and history and you know, what we used to do, what Mfundi was doing for us as activists in our time. But now we're activists in different settings, in the workplace, because there's activism there as well. And we are dealing with the reality of what the neo-colonial system and capitalism is doing to us. But from a student perspective and a student movement perspective, what should activism look like for you? And that is what we must think together in understanding. Because thina sizanibasela ngendlela esasiyenza ngayo, which is great, and it's nice. And we mustn't wear it as a badge of honor. But we should really ignite a sense of activism in you that is going to be relevant to where you guys are right now. Let me stop.
I'm just going to repeat. Activism must be defined by the generation that is contending with the struggle. That is such a powerful statement. And I would not want to be the person who's following after this. But the man seems confident enough. Mr. Thando Soga, you have 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Ndiyabule. Ndifuna ustarta by ndiqale ngeli gama lam lithi Thando uba lisuka phi. Unfortunately, okanye fortunately, I had an opportunity ngoku ndikhula. Ndihlala nabantu abadala phaa endlini, otamkhulu, omakhulu. Yawuzikhuliswe ngomakhulu thina. And I questioned eli gama lam lithi Thando. What was in your mind, Mama? Ngoku wawundibiza eli gama. Wathi kumu, ngoku zandikunika eli gama lithi Thando. Zandiyazi ukuthi ubana uzawuthandwa ngabantu. You will be loved. And kuyo yonke lonto, wathi I must always fight for the struggle of our people. Ndisuka kulo family ke mna ke ndinguSoga, is a name. Ndisuka phaa koTiyo Soga, ndiyi-direct descendant, andingomTshayina, ndiyi-direct. NdinguJwarha, umtika umazaleni uJodela. Umtingana. Idole limdaka, siyathandaza ke apha. I feel ukuthi ubana andikwazi uzi-introduce ndingamentionanga my ancestors, uba ndisuka phi. Going forward ke ngoku towards when I entered university space at the University of Fort, kwango-2014 ngoko. Ijam izawudivele nam. Kwango-2014 ngoko. There was a struggle, as I noticed, towards the student of that university, which is University of Fort, where our people were denied access to learning. Kunzima ungena. Uzenza zonke izinto, you go and fill in i-affidavit, uyo explainer i-situation yakho endlini, uzivule phaa. Or to be rejected. Not just be rejected within the institution, but financially as well, when you apply for funding. So when this thing of Ufizmas 4 started, we were sitting and sithetha ngento edibene ne-fee increment. City, there must not, but there must be zero fee increment. Sasitsho thina, siyimela sithi there must be zero fee increment. And it wasn't just the struggle of his students that we noticed. There was workers as well who were underpaid. No, but last I checked, zabe bhatala 1.2 workers zase University of Fort. Besiza kuthi besithi sicela uncedo. Khani sincedeni bantwana bami. And when we went to engage with the university told us, "Kani ni represent obani nina? Ni kweliphi icala? Uthini into yenu? Ngethani icala? Ni represent abafundi okanye workers, because there's workers union apha ezo represent." And sathi ke thina, you know, we are not, there's a relationship between students and workers. We exist, nabo they exist. I-existence yabo depends on tina as much as nathi. Njengoba sikwi-institutions, it depends kubo. So we cannot neglect i-crisis zabo nabo, xa besiza apha kuthi. So we said, sajonga le nto ka-Fismas 4 pam. I am ashamed to mention uba zandikwephi party at that time. Zandikla party. Zandikla party. Hayi ndabashiya, ndababona, ndabashiya. And it was equally important as well at that time, ba sibe kula mbutho zandikuyo. Hayi la mbutho wedaso uzandikuye ngoku. Sasipha kubo. But sasingavani nento enye. Kwaye befika abantu be-DA pha bazosixelela ukuthi how must we run ecampus yethu. Sathi ke thina ayizolunga kaloku. Sibani sisithi mention i-DA kwi-media of DA this, DA that. Say understand that we are part of it. Idaso lena, which is motherboard wethu pha. Sathi ayizolunga. So there was disagreements ukuthi, hence zange basiphane opportunities sathi babasele beyeka. But in terms of this thing of Fismas 4, sahlala, we tried to analyze sayijonga because it didn't just happen. Into azisuke zenzeke nathi nje. When we were fighting for this thing called Fismas 4, there was a concept of a philosophy behind it. The philosophy towards access to success. The philosophy of justice towards our people. Because kukabantu abathanda ukuthi let's discuss peace. We can't discuss peace unless we discuss justice. So we saw the living conditions. It's time to take it to the street. Siyepa, because our voices were not being heard, Payana, Kweza sitting environment when we were sitting with the institution management. So I am glad that I was part of it, La Movement Payana, which is Fismas 4. And ndiani encourage naba that are going to come along, ababazongena. When you enter university space, be involved in something. Khawukuz test the capabilities zakho. Hence, when she was mentioning ukuthi bana ndingu treasurer ndingu secretary, hayi bendizizo zonke unyanisile. So mandikhabe ndiyibamba apho before I go deeper into this thing called Fismas 4. Yes.
Okay, this is our full panel. Now we will be asking them questions. I'm going to do the first round of questions because I can monopolize things because, well, it be like that. And then after that, you will have the opportunity to ask any question that you possibly can and engage with our panel. You've heard what they had to say about Fees Must Fall. You've seen them set the scene of how it looked during the time, the conditions that they were living under, the way in which the school was structured and the institutions in general of higher learning. And you also heard them speak on what it was like to be on the ground, to be fighting against a system that seems bigger than what you are and that seems like it would put you down without a second of hesitation. That must have been a very difficult journey, I can imagine. But look at where they are now. Distinguished, astute. If I use other adjectives, it might just get serious. Or demo wrong. Now, my first question is, have these institutions truly transformed? Or has it just been the discourse that has? And also, is higher education truly accessible for all right now? You guys have done the work. We're celebrating or reflecting on 10 years. Is it accessible now? because that was one of the goals of the movement, for education to be accessible, defunded or free education for the middle class or previously disadvantaged. And to say previously disadvantaged is incorrect, because it wasn't previous, it's still happening even now. So I'm going to hand off the question to Azania first.
So, I think for me first, it's important that I include this, right, before I go into this question, because we don't often speak of the silliness of the spaces that we're educated in and how they are intentional about countering anything that has to do with decolonization, transformation, whatever term you want to employ at this point in time. Because immediately within that moment, what happens is, post that moment, what we see in universities, especially in the educational content or the material that students get to be educated in, silly enough, they get to include these texts that they categorize as black writers or black scholars, right? And of course, good as that might be, for me, it was reflective exactly of what South Africa is, precisely with the 1994 moment, in the sense that there was no commitment to change, but there's a commitment to just change the cosmic outlook of things, but not change intentionally the order of things and how the system operates. And in actual fact, this continued over time, you know. And I'm going to make this example because we must speak of the fact that even though UCAT categorizes us as distinguished, this is why I don't include my bio in things, there's a violence that still is taking place within the spaces. For instance, Dr. Pedro Mzileni, forgive me. For instance, Dr. Pedro Mzileni, former lecturer at UFS, you know, got chucked out because of the manner or the way in which he's teaching. What he was doing here is also what he was doing in lecture halls. But because whiteness is so organized, whiteness does not need to be present in spaces. It also needs conveyors of it to be present in spaces. Those are your rectors, your management of the university. Because in a way, their existence is to replicate, reproduce, but not change, right? So the counter then, insurgency, also goes and affects the basic education of the country. How does it affect basic education? Because I like the point that Uyaya is making, in that fees must fall is not just only about fees. It was intentional because I recall in some of the arguments that we had with the ministers of the country, when we were asked about this question of fees, when we posed that, what we want here is that students, or actually from grade R until your first degree, those must be free. We're also just being lenient to the state because the state on its own was being silly, ridiculous with these questions, constantly posing where it must get the funds from. Whereas we know where the state is going to get funds from, white monopoly capital of this country, which still controls everything, you know. So what that happens is, we see then in the years that ensue post this moment that no man, nansi isystem igeza ngoku, worse, kids are encouraged to pass with 40%. And people do not see this as a problem, or they do not see it as being engineered by the state as a mechanism of exclusion. So that we have a problem of kids who are not educated in the country because they've seen what we do once we become educated. We start interrogating not only the space in which we're educated in, but we interrogate the whole entirety of the system. Now, when you are saying umdana, that is at school must pass with 40%. What does that entail? It means I'm setting you up for failure, right? Because now we no longer have those technicons that were taking stupid white people and educating them for the sake of having qualifications. They've been, included within university spaces, which means therefore that anizukwazi ungena university because nipase ngo-40% kaloku. And the requirement of the university is not that. Now, you are then forced to compete with a child who has been prepared from early childhood development up until high school. Like developed in the sense that they are not only developed to go into university, but they are also developed in terms of controlling the resources and the means of production of the country. That leaves you and puts you on their side. Now, this is where then the question of access comes into space, because now e-access is only made indoor. I do not even want to say of a privileged few because they are also not privileged. But now access is also made indoor meritocracy in a way, right? Where people with no merits, are making these silly, dubious decisions that at the end of the day affect our children. What then this does, right, it therefore means that we find ourselves with a large cohort of children who cannot access higher education based upon this premise, even before we get to the issue of the question of NSFAS, the question of affordability of the education. But there's this one, you can't even access it, right? So it's the silliness then that comes with all of these things, because in a way, they are aware of the fact that in South Africa currently, a large number of graduates are chucked out of university. In that, how university or how education has been fashioned, it has been used as a tool of social upward mobility, right? Social upward mobility ke uzawuhamba uyoba slave educated as net degree, in some plantation or anywhere for that matter. But this is how we are taught that education means. And what then happens with this quasi upward social mobility, we find ourselves now with a larger people or a large cohort of people who were previously at university who are now unemployed, and a part of a system, that now demotivates abantwana from going into university, in the sense that abantwana bayazibuza into yobana hayibo ndizazithini i-degree nangu azani uhleli nezi-3 but into ayaziyo ukuhamba kwezi university abethetha. Ndizayithini into yaloo nto because nangu azania doesn't even have a car, but there are 15, 14, 18-year-olds who already have apartments, who are white, So abantwana do not aspire, to get into the spaces and be educated, because the coloniality does that, and that's how it functions, because it functions at the exclusion of us, and how it does it, it's always in the most sophisticated of ways that to the naked eye, you are not able to see it, but it requires some level of criticality that you are able to see it. So the question of access to institution is still very much not there, based upon this backdrop that I've just provided, and many other issues that emanate as a result of our ontological position as black bodies.
Right? I think the next question then would be towards you, Ms. Jubas. You said it doesn't make sense for you to sit here and tell us about the ways in which you were an activist, the things that you did, and how the struggle itself, coloniality, has mutated in different ways. And so activists also have to adapt. How do we adapt to something like this? How do we empower ourselves to fight against a system that is forever changing its face and shifting the goalposts at all times, so much so that you no longer know what exactly it is that you're opposing sometimes.
Sure. I think first of all, dialogue. Yes, it seems tiring, overdone, yadinisa to be very honest, because it's 13 tone. But it starts at this level. Because if you're going to be able then to understand how coloniality has mutated itself currently, and you as an activist, you need to be able, first of all, to talk about it amongst yourselves. You need to be able to define it. You need to have words for it. You need to be able then, once you've been able to name something, and it's put a name and shame. So once you name something, once you've been able to grasp it, to dissect it, to unpack it, then you are then able to diagnose it correctly so that you know how to respond. So how then do you become an activist for this current time? Is then also going to be defined through your dissection, through your diagnosis, through the conversation. And then ke ngoku, you must not completely eliminate the generation that came before you. Because you need to be able to borrow some level of perspective. Because in as much as it's mutated itself, it's not completely changed. Do you understand? It's systematic. It still has the same root cause levels. But you need to have what is called an intergenerational conversation. What is happening in this very room? Because now if you're going to have a conversation just amongst each other, yes, it's good and well. It is innovative. But you need to be able then to bring azania nabo bazawutsho mamelani ke sakhe sayibona le yabo kanit. Because if you do not diagnose it, if you do not have names and words for it, then ke ngoku you are going to be running around in the same spaces. Number 2, identify progressives in the university, man. It helps to have allies in management. It really does. And it tengisani. Because nina lento yoba xa nisondele management nithengise umzabalazo. No, have progressive. And activism, sanuyitixela nje xa niyotshisa amatayara eSouth Campus. Activism exists in the classroom as well. Ask the difficult questions. Contest la textbook ka Van Riebeeck ithethwayo phayana. Ask why in my study material Mzileni is not reflected, but he has a PhD and he's well versed in this topic. Ask, contend, contest. Irongo lento xa ungumntu omtsha uvela uvume yonke into. Yes, boss. Okay, it's good. The energy of a young person is contestation. It is contestation. Because if you do not contest it, the system does not show its claws until it is contested, by the way. I'll repeat that. The system does not show its claws until it is contested. Nizawuyibona ke coloniality until you make it uncomfortable. Ilento leqiso Pedro as university is because it makes it, he says nothing, he just spoke, and he spoke black history in an undiluted, correct way. So I'm saying it's dialogue. Identify progressives who are in the system, because you are dealing with the system, it's the truth. And number 3, have intergenerational conversations. I think, let me stop there.
Dr. Mzileni, this one is for you. You spoke of the social fabrications of not just color in this country, but of that come to stay in the psyche of the oppressed. What does it look like to begin to remove those social fabrications from one's mind, from one's psyche? How does one pinpoint the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to keep my response very short because I want to have a conversation actually with people in the room. I want you guys to state your comments, what you think on the lecture given and also on the responses so that I can have a conversation with all of you. You get my point. But what I'm going to say at the moment is quite simple. Understand that the Fees Must Fall movement, 2015, 2016, it was being conducted by students who were 16 years old, 17 years old, 18, 19, 20. Are you with me? So these are relatively very young people, inexperienced in political organizing, right? And they had to wage a struggle against a huge beast called the colonial university. And we only had 4 to 6 weeks, Jubase, to, wage this struggle against this beast. So we were working with what we knew at that time. Yeah. We were working with what we had at that time, right? And we were working against an enemy based on the knowledge and the context we were living in at that time. Are you with me? So naturally, a struggle like this, it will have major breakthroughs, but it will also have strategic weaknesses, right? Based on the time it was being done, the people that were involved there, and the enemy that they were dealing with. For me personally, it is only now actually where I am now able to read a bit more properly what was going on. Yeah. And to connect it to broader historical questions of what exactly we were actually dealing with, Hence, when I started with a point that says, actually what happened during that period, it's still at its early stages of study. It still needs to be further investigated, and it still needs to be studied from many different points of view. But at least at the moment, we do have evidence on the table to build that archive as we try to make sense of that memory and what it means today. So, coming now to the epistemic project. In other words, when coloniality now moves into the minds of the oppressed, in the minds of black people, what then do we do? The answer is simple. You need to make education an everyday activity in your daily life as a black young person. And by education, I don't mean wearing a school uniform, sitting behind a desk, memorizing the textbook to write an exam. 2-3 days after that exam, you've completely forgotten what you were memorizing for that exam. That is not education. That is actually domestication, right? Education, Ma-Africa, in this room means daily conversations amongst ourselves to understand our existential reality and what kind of struggles must we wage to win the revolution to address that existential reality. So in other words, conversations like this for black people are never a waste of time, because education for people who are oppressed, it's not work or a luxury. It's actually a compulsory service, right? Because we need to keep reminding ourselves every day of the enemy we're dealing with every day and what we need to do ourselves to liberate ourselves. Because there's no Messiah coming. You've got to work for your liberation as black people yourselves, right? And also, when you do that daily education amongst yourselves, that's why institutions like Conrad are so important in a colonial university, right? Because institutions like Conrad and what we're doing in this room, these platforms, they give you a break from the suffocating pedagogy of the colonial classroom that you receive Monday to Friday, where you are forced to read things that do not even resonate with your spirit, simply because you just want to memorize the damn thing to pass, to get a qualification. That is a very dehumanizing experience of learning, you know? So these platforms created outside of the classroom by Conrad, even by political schools of, student organizations, they are the most joyful spaces to belong in, because finally you get to receive good food for your spirit and your mind, which are two critical things you need, right? To wage struggles that will free your people and your generation over the years. Because everything you do in life, it's a product of what you learn. Are you with me? Everything that you do in life, it's a product of a particular paradigm of thinking, right? Your school uniform is red, right? If you find out, just to dig, why is it red? You'll find that it is red because someone somewhere conceptualized the concept behind the name of the school and the color red, and therefore the uniform will be red. So red didn't come from the sky. It was informed by a particular paradigm of thinking by someone somewhere. You get my point? So everything you do as an individual, even the way you are dressed today, the clothes you are wearing today, right? The qualification you chose to do, what you're going to do tonight, all those things are informed by how you think. And how you think is informed by the things you have taught and the things you've been exposed to. So knowledge, essentially, is the alpha and omega of daily life. It is the only thing that informs what type of decisions you take in life. So without dialogue and critical knowledge on a daily basis, you are going to continue being lost and taking decisions that are not intelligent for your race. So as you grow up again in schools, in universities, the one thing now I want you to obsess yourself about is, in this journey that I am on, what is going to be my service to black people? Not which career I want to become. That question is going to lose you. Right? Sobukwe says, education to us, right, is service to Africa. Now, when I start my classes at the University of Zululand, we always dedicate 5 minutes with my students at the beginning for only a conversation about two things. What is the purpose of knowledge? What is the purpose of a university? Before the class starts, we start there. Every single lecture. What is the purpose of a university? What is the purpose of education? The first 10 minutes are about that conversation. Then minute 11, we start again with the content of that day. Why do I do that? Because I want to keep reminding them every single day that the reason why your name is Siposetu and you are alive today, it is because you are an addition to a black civilization, and you have a duty to service the black civilization, to make your contribution in that civilization whilst you are alive. And that is how you won't be forgotten by your own people. We've forgotten all billionaires in life, but we'll never forget Biko. We'll never forget Lillian Ngoyi. We'll never forget Winnie Mandela. We'll never forget Robert Sobukwe. Were these people billionaires? They're not billionaires. We remember them because in the civilization and the evolution of black people, these people played a service to black life. So ask yourself every day that in me imbibing knowledge and education every day from institutions, from other people, what is my service to black people?
Bona, this conversation is one unlike any other, honestly. But I must say, Dr. Pedro, you said you were going to keep it short. Abana ba re bua Mfundi, ra bua ka nnete. Now, Mr. Soga, before we hand it over to the crowd, mine to you is understanding whether or not the people who are struggling during Fees Must Fall actually got to gain from the possible gains of the movement itself. Did they gain anything? How has that impacted them? And what do their lives look like?
Oh, thank you. Ngiyamthanda lo mbuzo umbuzayo yazi. Uba the people who were part of the Fees Must Fall movement, what did they get out of it? Bafumene ntoni bona? If you notice, during the time of Fees Must Fall, we were busy protesting. There was a large number of our fellow students who were not willing to put down arms. They were still, even when the president of that time, which was Jacob Zuma, when he announced, Ubana, there will be zero fees, it's free education. And he was exiting at that time. Wakon by, Saishelo Nyumtule, Waiteta by. We have Fees Must Fall, if fees is a will. We never got the opportunity to sit down, Tina, as the people were protesting, to try and analyze the landscape, digest, vule, jonge. Ukuti, what is this thing called Fees Must Fall? Indoni kanye kanye. Indoni le silweleyo apha kuthiwa siyifumene ngoku. And to whom does it benefit? Xa sijonga, the people who were protesting kwelaa cala, when they went back into institutions, you find the gate was closed. Kuthiwa hayi kaloku Mfundi wena, you've exceeded your number of years at university. You no longer have funding, the N+2 rule, N+2 ngoko. And the question was, wait. Need we have free education ngoko. The fees si free ngoko, yonke free. But now I can't seem to access because kukityala lami nalo pha in the institution. And kukole basari has been converted now, because if you remember at that time, we were under NSFAS loan. Yai loan. I remember posing this question to President of SAWOS. Indeed, you must remember, yai NSFAS loan galokli. Now, kutwa, there's an NSFAS basar. Can you guys give us the opportunity? Naati kesi fumane kule NSFAS basar. That one I'm gonna pay it back. Loan. So now, let's talk about le basari ngoku. Lena kuthiwa nam, I am part of ngoku. Nam kufuneke ndingene kwazi access institution. They saying no, kaloku thina sakufanda wena sigqibile inyaka yakho wena. Ndithi but I'm going to pay it back, it's a loan. Now I want to apply for le basari. The people said ayizolunga. Hence you found the people there were cries outside, abantu besithi, nithi masithini ngoku. Abantu abafuna uthi let down arms, sithi hayi kaloku istruggle siphelile ngoku, but abantu hayibo, andinandawo, ndizawungena phi? Institution ivalile pha, andikwazi ungena. It was a very sad moment for the young people of our country because they got excluded. And if you're noticing nangoku, we are easily being phased out of institution. Policies that ezihlalayo phakweni as fast, they are constantly changed. Who is being consulted? Siya consultwa thina? Andikhumbule nibizwa. Who is sitting phaya? And I pose this question, ngubani luhlala phaya and saying uyasirepresenta? Then I found there is an organization called the SAUS, which is the South African Union of Students. It represents zonke as universities. It gets to sit per no minister pa. And they get to decide, because every time Tina as SRC's sikhala, city, iqale ngokutshintsha lento from NS plus to N plus 2 to N plus 1 ngoku. Who gubani umuntu ovumeleyo? And then they will tell us ukuthi hayibo SAUS was there, be representile pha. Ufike pha bavuma yonke into. And yanoba kuyalalo kanye kwenziwa ntoni, but bayavuma yonke into pha. So it becomes a problem for Tina as African people in terms of our philosophy, our way of living, Tina as Africans. What is it that we are trying to achieve? So when they change as policies, as fast, sabona ukuthi hey ikhona ingxaki, because now you find the battles that we fought at that time is still the battles that abantu basazilona namhlanje, because we never properly sat down. Ndifuna uyivala because ndiyabona seyiphaka ngokuthi, you know, there used to be a time since mnamos ndikhulile ngapha eMdantsane, you know, whereby kubakho that particular person in the community where you pass down okanye ugqitha by a household yalo mntu wayehlala apho okanye i-graveyard yakhe, you pass by i-graveyard yakhe lo, kuye kuthiwe oh yayingumntu ke lowa, which automatically speaks as this person was the embodiment of others. So now I pose this question, Kuni. When you live here, will you be that person when? That people will one day sit down and say, oh, Katlego, ebengumntu ke lowa. Ndiyabulela.
Okay. Now the floor is open to the masses. Are you ready with your, okay, my brother in Christ? We have a question in the back. Are you still going to ask this question? Yes, we have one question in the back. A second one. Third one to the lady in red. We have two left. Okay, you can get the one. And another one to the lady in red over there. We have 5 questions and a rolling mic, if I'm not mistaken. That's okay, we can roll this one. All right. First question. Oh, okay. At the back. Can we get your name and your surname, sir?
Let me start off by greeting keynote speaker yethu, panelists, general student populace lapha, abafundi from high school, all protocols observed. My name is Kamvaliethu Shamza, a general student of Nelson Mandela University. I've got more of a submission rather than a question, but I'll try to be short like a miniskirt, and then hopefully what my views draw your attention like a pencil skirt. Now, there's a question posed there, where are we now? I'd really say we're in a state of regression. The gains of the fees must full movement have been reversed. Now, the fees must fall movement was not only a protest to subdue the rising fees, but also a campaign for free quality education. Now, Mr. Soga talked about access and success. Now, you fight, you figure up school, you access the institution. Now, you're posed with success. Succeed. You face issues along the way. The only way is to protest to get the attention of the university. When you protest, you're met by armed men on campus. Met by armed men, you're met by the police, you're a bunch. So we're facing issues of campuses are being militarized now. Now, kubanzima to deal with those issues because wonke umuntu uyikubanjwa ngo. I also want to make a comment of saying education has now become a commodity, a scarce commodity, of which its availability it's to those who can afford it. Now, if I'm not you won't access. You don't have funding, you're doing nothing. Yeah, I think that's just about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you, Chair. I was here yesterday. I was with you here yesterday, and I'm here today as well.
So happy.
There's something you do not know about me. I'm coming from the tradition of student activism in the early 90s. I'm one of the founder members of the Azanian Students Convention in this institution. I'm happy to be here. I'm very happy to be here. We have hooked up with our fellow Comrade Veli along the way in the same organization in the Western Cape. I'm here with me, I'm with a comrade. I went to pick up, I said, hey, come here, come in here. Maybe you are going to be rejuvenated by these students. He's a reflection of the very struggles that are here. He was expelled. Comrade Luando, stand up, let them see you. He was expelled for doing exactly the same thing that you guys are doing. In that light, you know what I want to do? I want to take this opportunity and commend Conrad and DDP for opening up space for these, what I said to Undlovizol, Comrade Pedro, uncomfortable discussions. These discussions are uncomfortable. Do you see, truth is uncomforting because these people have peddled a lot of lies about us, about our history, and now once we start talking about those histories, they become uncomfortable. And what is even worse, do you see, for me, is that black liberals are more uncomfortable than the liberals themselves. Yes. So that's our challenge. You know, as I was listening to my sister there from the Youth League and others, of course, every time you guys start to talk, there's a slogan that is coming out of my mind. When Pedro is saying something, there's another slogan. For instance, I will read those slogans this minute. Mine is just a comment, I'll sit down.
Take your time.
You cannot be conscious of yourself and yet remain in bondage. So in other words, consciousness and bondage don't go together. Once we are clear who you are, nobody can then put you together, or maybe no bondage can ever touch you. You cannot be conscious. And consciousness presupposes that you've got to know who you are today. Who were you before? And who are you going to be? Who do you want to be going forward? Do you see? So that's what it means. So it means today we're coming to ask ourselves, all of us, who are we today? And you were just saying, my sister there, you were saying, look, we are not previously disadvantaged. We are still,
To this day.
we continue to be. So, you know, I just want to say I'm really, I don't know whether I'm rejuvenated or I'm re-angered, if you like. I don't know whether I'm angered all over again, that some of those things that we're talking about have not changed. They remain that way. But now the question, as Undlo was addressing the gathering that was there yesterday, to me, do you see what is agitating for me? I was saying that to Azania also yesterday, that do you see, for me, democracy is limiting. And now we're dealing with the effects of the 1994 democracy dispensation. And then now we're limited by that democracy. Because now everybody here, there are things my sister there in the middle will not say because she won't go to parliament if she continues to talk those things. So why should it be like that? Because that very thing, it means we've got uncomfortable truths that we've got to talk about. So for me, I'm really excited that there's this kind of a gathering. I'm worried that a lot of other young people are not here. I'm all seeing these red jerseys here. I'm not seeing a lot of other people because I think spaces should be opened. We've got to start to reorientate ourselves. Do you see? Because people really liberated, they don't ask for freedom. They just take it. That's what they do. They take it. So now, which is what we're preparing now, that these young people must not demand. They must take, because it's now theirs. If they are truly liberated in the sense that Dr. Pedro Mzileni was talking about, if they are truly liberated, then they must just take it. Maybe let me sit down. Only the last question would be that for me. Where do we go from here? Because this is what was lingering in my mind yesterday. Where we do, okay, now we've had enough of all this. Where do we go from here? Are we going to continue? There's a Burkina Faso project where people have just taken their land and started doing, where do we go from here? Because we're going to go to another elections next 5 years, we're going to go to another elections, and we're going to sit here again. Because like you were saying yesterday, that you see the system, the white supremacists always find a way of mutating and adapting in order to continue to maintain itself. Let me leave it there. My name is Sithembele Phakade. Ngudlamini lo ngujama kaSijad benivile umjwarha ufakade lo phuma kwesa siduko sasemajwarheni ndiphuma kwandivile sita ngomtshana ndingumtshana. Let me leave it there. Enkosi kakhulu.
Thank you so much. We have one of the learners. She had her hand up. First row of the red jerseys. There we go.
Greetings with love to the former activists and the former young leaders. The one standing in front of you today is Buhle Tembani. I stand before you today because I'm concerned about the treatments of the activists, and I'm also wondering why the black attracted to being coconuts. I'm wondering why black people are being treated this unfairly. And sometimes I ask myself, why are the universities actually allowing learners to have 40% levels? On the other side, while they're going to be questioning the fees must fall. Because you cannot expect learners to get 40% and also allow them to stop going to the universities while you allow them to come to the university with such low levels. I'm really concerned. And my question for today's topic is, what was the DNA response when you tell them that you're not going to be part of their political party? Recommended to Mr. Stock.
Okay, thank you very much. Very, very, very controversial. I like you. I like the way you think. I love your brain. We have the other lady, you will be the last. The other lady in red. I hope we are noting down these questions. Are we okay? Yes.
Afternoon, everyone. Standing in front of you is Zipama Swana. I'm from Loiso High School, located in Zwede. So today I have two questions. The first one is, how did the protest influence political discourse and policy making in South Africa? The second question is, is what lessons can be learned from the hashtag Fees Must Fall movement for other movement and social change efforts? And if it's allowed, I'm asking this question to Usis Yandisa Chubas. Thank you.
Okay. I share the gentleman in the black hat over there with the jean jacket.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I would like to start first, greet my constituency there, the Congress of the South African Students in Waiting.
Way.
COSAS.
Last number.
And then greet the panelists, good day, and greet the fellow audience. I go by the name of Sionela Matsitsela. I lead them in the Congress of the South African Students. And then I'm the acting national spokesperson of the South African Students Federation. Let me start by saying that after COVID-19 pandemic, the second one is the issue of students, the issue ongoing struggles of students. That's the second pandemic that we're facing in each and every year of our lives. But let me say it's before COVID-19 because the issue started in 2014. That's where it all happened. Now, I would like to comment on the question of the last speaker there, because I always give answers and these panelists help them. Is the higher education accessible to all? No. That's the answer. No. Because we're being charged ridiculous, shocking application fees. Ridiculous, shocking application fees. The state of application fees are very, very shocking in this country. You find that in University of Pretoria there, I paid 300 rands for an application. Wits University, I pay 100 rands. Where am I going to get that 100 rands? I want to go and study in Witwatersrand. That is not all. Now, the gains of fees must fall. Were they in vain or not? Or were they gainful? Let me say so. Through its assisted parameters and the paradigm, I will give two answers. They are in gain because it has brought important transformations and foundations. And then they are in vain because there are ongoing student issues in this country. The res applications are shocking. We find crime, high crime rate, and also we find fees and also debt in shocking. Because you may find that where I come from, I did not owe anything. But when I come to Nelson Mandela University today, I'm owing 120,000 rands. Where am I going to get that money? And also sometimes NSFAS pays late these days. It pays late. I'm using NSFAS. It pays late. So where am I going to get that money to pay that fee? You find that next year I'm graduating, I'm not going to receive my qualification because of that 120 rands, of which, where did I get it from? Where? What are we actively doing in order to change this issue of historical debts? And also, if we say that the gains of fees must fall are in vain, let's change that in vain side and ask ourselves today, what are we actively doing in order to change that in vain, in also to form it as it is to a gain and a victory. I thank you very much.
This is a floor full of intellectuals who are shaking. Look, the panelists were here vibrating in their chairs as soon as you started speaking. So they have quite a task ahead of them. We are going to accept questions in the next round. However, I would like our panelists to answer the questions that were posed to you. You also received assistance in the form of answers to questions. So it's okay, we have other panelists sitting in the audience. But please, I want to start with you, Mr. Soga, because, hey, it was a very difficult question in your direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Ndixakiwe apha noba ndiqale ndiphendlele kaluhle okanye ndingene clear of the struggle, the ongoing struggles ibike avezo. Ithini solution? Where are we? Siyaphi ngoku? Bibuzwe ngutata pha uba siyaphi ngoku. Let me start with that one. Ngizawubuya kule ye-DA. Siphi ngoku? Where are we now? You know, after a decade since the post fees must fall protest, when we look at the current affairs as in Zekayo, not much has changed. Because as my fellow comrade, Ushamza, that side, has mentioned, that if you even enter into institutions, they've militarized institution. Utungena udibana madoda amakhulu abaphethe imipu. Kwabantwana abazofunda ngephofu. That already there's a psychological impact edlalayo apha kuwe. As umuntu osuke high school usuke emakhaya awuqhelanga lento ubona belungu bakhulu baphethe imipu. Ebeyithethile ke uDr Pedro ukuthi bana bango undertaker babani bevuka. And nathi ndifuna ukuthi thina as students and student leaders, we need to account ngoba yaphela lanto yethu yodibana sit together ourselves as students and political parties as well. There used to be a thing called student parliament. It no longer exists. Okonfikela Nelson Mandela okuthiwa hayi izawuhlala izawubizwa ayidibizwe. Student parliament composes of zonke societies. When you enter university space, you find societies, church societies, business societies, bonke abantu basmart. And it's composed of students. And that used to be a platform where we used to sit and discuss policies of the institution. When it also comes down to also elections, because we find no online elections, who's controlling that? Because ngavuka ngomso kuthiwe kuphethe idazo. Uvuya ngomso kuthiwe kuphethe iFF. Hayi ke isasko ke lendi kuyo ayigqibele kudala yena uphatha babantu beyikhupha qho. Bayibona ngathi ingxaki. So it poses a question kuthi bana, how did we get here? Sivumele lento. And I looked at student activism. It's slowly being phased out. Institution iyayikhupha. Bafuna uintroduce lanto yebelungu whereby uzo kuthiwa uyinto engane ntwazinto or head girl ezando. Yeah, head boy. Bafuna introduce ezonto where you get appointed. You know, there's an important thing about being elected. Because the people say, we believe kuwe, uba wena you safeguard and uzayichannel responsibility yokuthi ubana ulwele izistruggles zabafundi. So, last student activism needs to be, funeka iphinde ivuke. Funeka siphinde sibe nomsindo man, ke siphinde sihlabe kulaa ndawo le, ubone uba umuntu ukhathazekile xa ubhizi esilondeni sakhe, uba nomsindo xa umthunuka athi uyandithunuka. Masiphinde ke sijonge uba sizabavusa njani aba bantu. These students ke siphinde sibathunuke. Sibaxelele ukuthi bana if you don't get up ngoku and fight for yourselves, no one else is going to fight There is no Messiah. I'll come to Zaya. We have to organize ourselves. And if I can move that question about the response of EDA when I left them, DASOP of DA. Let me give a little bit of a background. The answer quick. I was unfortunate or fortunate, I like to use that term, to had a colonialist man in Kulisileyo. Upako Bota, the Bota family. So I asked the Prime Minister of our country, the one who has colonized Zayo, P.W. Bota, we used to colonize. So one of their own, we are one coolies. I got to learn the way they think. I had that opportunity. And ngokuzanhleli kule tafile yabo ndabona ukuthi hey, there's nothing apethethwayo towards the service of my people. They are safeguarding their own interests about how can we continue to retain lento sinayo. Hence, when after 1994 we said we want political power, but we never want economic power. We never spoke ngezando. Strong, who's actually in charge. So, kwabala concept, kukona ANC nala concept iti buyele kaya, ya driver. And yayazi xa ubethakele life in, there's always a kaya. You go back home. So this is what happened kum. Ndababona for what they are. And yandinceda ukuthi bandikhulise. Ndakukhula ngidiye bandikhulisa bandifundisa bathi hayi uzasikhokhela wena one day sawufaka wena. But kukho lanto inside of thina, you know, your spirit ingavumelani nalento ithethwa apho kombe yeah ndiyabashiya bayadlala. So this is what happened. Ndabashiya. And bathi besaqala uresponda ndathi how can you jonge emaphepheni upha, you won't even find my signature ukuthi I'm a member of the DA. Kuthiwa njani? And bayoyijonga kwayanga apha bayoyijonga eCape Town, when they checked nyani zange ndasayina nix kodwa zalihleli nabo ntyapha etafuleni nabo. But ke ungahlala etafuleni nabantu, but ekugqibeleni who's owning le tafule? The directive, the conversation. Ndabona ukuthi ayizolunga, and I didn't even give them a chance to respond. Ndasuke ndabashiya ndabuyela ekhaya. So ndayishiya apho.
Thank you. I think most it was comments, but there was a Tifuna ukuya girls is filming. I have a very, very soft spot for young women who are able to voice out their opinion. I like that you use the word concerned. You know, how do you begin to become an activist? You become bothered by things. There are things that just irritate you, that you like, why are things the way that they are? So the only thing I would like to say to you is that do not stop questioning it. Don't stop questioning, don't just think because you are concerned, you are just concerned. It means that there's an activist spirit within you that you need to nurture. And how do you nurture it? It's in spaces like this. It's in reading. It's in asking the difficult questions. And then she gave me 2 questions. The first one is, how did the protest influence discourse and policy making? I really do think outside of the shortfalls of fees must fall, Okanye, when we're talking about that, it's regressing, they are reversal of the gains. But what it did is that it highlighted the importance of us archiving our history in the way that we must write our own history so that it is not distorted. Fees Must Fall produced writers. It produced people now who would go into further deeper into coloniality, and produces scholars of our time who are able to unearth our history in a way that is not from the lens of the white man. It brought about the importance of centering gender politics and understanding and giving names to things like masculinity, patriarchy. When I got to school, they were not a thing then. But with the Fees Must Fall movement, we understood that part of our struggles and what we were dealing with was very much gendered and masculine. So it influenced discourse that we were able now to name things. It unearthed scholars like Frantz Fanon, Karl Marx, Sobukwe. So it is that it influenced discourse because now Black people were able, and students were able then to now name things for what they are and archive our stories, not in a distorted lens, but truthfully. We understood Apa Indoyobana. There is, and the struggle of Fees Must Fall was intersectional, it's in nature. We're not just dealing with one thing. We're dealing with the fact that in these very institutions that are supposed to protect female bodies, we are not protected and we are not safe. It unearthed a lot of things, and that's how it influenced discourse and policy making, right? But I think, like Pedro said, we're still at the beginning of understanding fully what Fees Must Fall did and what it should have done. And I think when we're at the 10-year mark, Katlego, I really commend this platform because, I can't believe it's been 10 years. Not because Angwazubala, but because I think there's a certain level of suppressing things when they are traumatic. I don't know if that makes sense. Because Fees Must Fall, we must talk about it, but we must not overly what's this word? Yes, that one. Yeah, we must not make it like it was this fluffy, a mandala type of moment. But really, we were contending. We were in a contested terrain. And like I said, coloniality has a way now, contest, it shows you how ugly it can be. So, yeah, and what can we learn from the movement is resistance. Hey, kuyanceda uba nenkani ungumuntu omtsha ngamanye amaxesha. Not always, God. Resistance. Resistance is what we should take away from the movement. Because there was a time where our backs were really against the wall. Abanye bayabanjwa, abanye babanjwa ezicaleni kwama-brown envelope. There's so much going on. But that culture of resistance and collective, a generational mission is important. You need to define your generational mission and a sense of collectivism. Because there was a moment before, it had elements up at Gqibeleni, Fees Must Fall now, where it was being hijacked, was being this, whatever. But there was a moment where for a moment we put aside these keepers here too of different colors. And we just became Black people or Black students that were fighting against a system that was oppressing all of us. So naturally we're in a democracy and democracy demands that but capitalism and coloniality does not care. If you're Black, it deals with you the same way. Yellow, red, blue, green. It matters not. So I think what we can learn is that sense of collectivism and defining a generational mission. Thanks.
Because we are pressed for time, we will unfortunately not be able to take another round of questions. However, In the foyer, you are going to be able to speak to the panelists and have as many conversations with them as possible. One last thing that I would like us to do. We're going to switch off the lights. No one's trying to romance you. Please relax. The reason why we're switching off the lights is because we have compiled a trailer. We are conducting interviews for a documentary that we're doing based on the theme 10 years since Fees Must Fall. Where are we now?
Unarmed and bled. The suspect is unarmed and dangerous. Unarmed and bled. Unarmed and bled. The suspect is unarmed and dangerous. Unarmed.
What I'm simply saying is that when a university starts to be military, it invites more chaos within the university space.
With burning tires for eyes, this boy is alive.
You know, that protest was so peaceful for at least 2 months until the university started to bring police inside campus. And then buildings started to burn. There was violence, there was vandalization of property. Not that I'm encouraging any of that.
Upon those brooding shoulders.
I get once it started with Roads Must Fall, right? And with Roads Must Fall, the students at AUCT were protesting the fact that education in our time, right, is still rooted in a lot of coloniality, right? It wasn't just a call for the statue to fall, right, but what the statue symbolized. Roads Must Fall further went on to become a Fees Must Fall.
Fees Must Fall was tough. Fees Must Fall was tough. I think as a staff member who understood and identified the plight of the students, you know, who are finally expressing and bringing to the fore a lot of things that I identified with that were real even at my time, but because I felt I didn't have the space to or the voice to, you know, kind of voice it in the way that Fees Must Fall did. You know, that was what, you know, was very inspiring and admirable for me at the time. This is just now on a, you know, on a personal level.
Imagine writing an affidavit explaining your poverty, providing all the required documents only for you to be rejected and told that you do not qualify for NSFAS. Not because you are not poor, but because there's no money to fund you. So that really affected us psychologically, and it made us, whenever we had an opportunity to fight or to represent ourselves, it made us to speak out and let our voices be heard.
Whether we EFF, whether we SASCO, whether we don't know, but imali xa ungenayo awunayo, and I'm not political party, you understand? So I think, yes, we understood the gravity of what we were fighting for, and it was genuine. It really was genuine, you know, yeah.
Nestled in its sleeves will be kindled.
I think there's a little bit of backwardness. As much as initially the universities sounded as if they are for transformation and all of that, but now there's a sense of reverse of that by action. Because if you are going to constantly have court orders being displayed around campus, you have, I don't know now, we have armed forces that are always around the campus, especially when there's a protest. Yeah. So which show the lack of tolerance for democracy, the lack of tolerance for agitating voices or for critical voices, if I am to say. There's lack of tolerance for student protest in the university.
Boy, never forget to tug your skin in.
Because we can't be arguing and fighting for the same things that we fought for 10 years ago. It doesn't make sense. It's not right.
The suspect is unarmed and dangerous, unarmed and black, unarmed and bled. The suspect is unarmed and dangerous, unarmed and black, unarmed and bled.
This is an ongoing project, and we will be featuring the different experiences of everybody that was involved in the movement, to hear the voices of those that were impacted by the movement today is nothing short of amazing. It is a blessing to be able to have intergenerational dialogue such as this one. I owe a huge thank you to all of you here. The school that came here, thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for even taking out your notebooks. You are very serious. Look, you took it to heart and you understood everything and you interacted. And that is all we want in spaces such as this. Your voice matters. And we are here to make sure that we are nurturing your voices and empowering you with as much information as possible. Now, that is not the only type of nurturing that we do here at Kenred. We understand that there are politics of the stomach. And they too need to be catered to in a parliamentary fashion. And understandably so. To my colleagues, thank you for all of the hard work that you've put in. Thank you for staying late at night in helping us set up. Thank you to our sound team, our videographers. All of this is because of them. The visuals you're seeing. To these three amazing people, please stand up. I feel like we owe them a round of applause. This is my production team. Y'all better get up. These are the young voices to look out for. On your TV screen soon, you're going to be seeing their works and their production. This marks the end of our program. We have gifts for our speakers. And while we give them out, you may go out and have your lunch.